Okay, so this is entitled Parshas Kedoshim Mitzvah Marathon.
Are you going to tell us where you got the idea from?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any speculations?
A friend. Oh, you put it on Facebook, and then someone commented and gave you the idea.
No, unfortunately not. That would have been a good story. I got the inspiration from the fact that there's actual inspiration, but it hit me the other day that I was not teaching 10th grade Chumash when you guys were in 10th grade. I taught every year 10th grade Chumash up until then, and then I started teaching AP English, and they cut my 10th grade Chumash. So, and then they gave it back to me last year. So I used to do this as part of my Vayikra curriculum, and we would do a thing called Mitzvah of the Day. And so that's where the original inspiration came from. But first of all, let's do our old friends, the Lomdeha term of the day. Yeah. So I'm sure you are more familiar with these terms now than you were in 10th grade, bekius and bekius.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So which one's which?
Bekius is in short.
Yep.
Bekius is like literally translated, right?
No, not in long.
In depth.
In depth, yeah, right. Yeah. So the literal translation of bekius is like expertise. I think is the best translation. It means learning to get a breadth or width of knowledge. And obviously, usually you're gonna have to sacrifice depth if you're trying to cover more ground. And then iyun is in-depth study. Iyun literally means like analysis. And that's learning to get a depth of understanding. And usually you don't go as breadth-wise. And then do you know the fake word that's a combo of the two? Bekius, yeah, okay, right. Which I think you would spell it like that. So I don't know if this is the thing.
I feel like get rid of the olive.
So I originally got rid of the aleph, but then I realized that this is the most accurate way because you're combining bucky with an aleph. It looks weird though, yeah. So this is either in-depth breadth or breadth of in-depth knowledge. Okay, so the way I use it, I have a Rambam bekius here in yeshiva, but it's really a bekius here, which means we're trying to cover ground, but then we stop to smell the roses, like we stop to think, And then the other way to do it, which is kind of how I want to use it today, is a breadth of knowledge of in-depth ideas. Okay, so for example, let's say like with Mishlei, like I teach Mishlei every day, and we go in depth on each pasuk. But then I walk away with the fact of like, I have like just hundreds of psukim that like, I'm fluent in the ideas, like I learn them all in depth, but then they have them at my fingertips, So what we're going to do today is like this, 3 objectives. First one is we're going to start at the beginning of Parashas Kedoshim and try to learn through as many mitzvos as we can, bekius style, or if we fail, meaning because we all love thinking so much, we'll at least do a bekius style, okay, in the time that we have. We're just going to go straight through as many as we can, which is an unusual kind of shir because I think literally every shir this year has been an in-depth thing, And the reason why I'm doing it for Kedoshim is in the opening pasuk, it says, Daber kol adas b'nei Yisrael, okay? Now, do you know halachically what the significance of that is? There's a Rashi on it, which is how you might know. Yeah. Yeah, why? What context was this spoken to them? Hakel, yeah, nice, good. So Rashi is quoting from the Sifra that it says this teaches that this was said at Hakel, which is the public Torah reading every 7 years that the king did in the Mikdash, where all the men, women, and children were there. And then it says, why was it said at Hakel? Because I translate it as the most core elements of the Torah depend upon it. Okay, so what would you assume that meant? Most core elements of Torah depend on it. That's what I would think also, right? Is that the fundamentals are depending on it, and there are some Mepharshim who even say that like it follows like the order of the Seres HaDibros, something like that. I saw another shot of this from the Torah Tamima, which was also good. Torah Tamima says, it's necessary to say that the intent is that the majority of laws in this parsha are relevant to the knowledge of every average person in their ways of life or like their day-to-day life, as is clear in the eyes of the reader, unlike in other mitzvos, which the individual doesn't do without the instruction or psak of a rav and a posek. So a lot of these mitzvos are such that like you will just be implementing them on your own in the course of your day-to-day life, whereas opposed to, let's say, like kashrus stuff or like mikdash stuff or nida stuff, like you're implementing them on your day-to-day life also, but like there's a realm of like expertise, whereas most of these mitzvos, the halachos can be like conveyed in a few a few easy steps. Okay, so that's why we're doing this in Parshas Kedoshim. Okay, yeah, like I don't remember the number.
Definition.
What was it?
What's like special about Parshas Kedoshim?
Well, that's I think what the Sifra is saying, that they were all put there in order to make sure that all Jews were fluent in these.
I'm saying like in terms of like the chronology of like the Torah.
Oh, so it's weird because Vayikra is mostly laws, right? So there's no real chronology to speak of.
Okay.
So I don't know why Parshas Kedoshim takes place here, if that's what you're asking in Vayikra. Yeah. So you're already going in depth, I know.
Sorry.
No. You can totally ask questions. What was that?
Saying about like the average person, because I remember learning about like Kedoshim in class, it's kind of like feeling like Kedoshim to you, like beyond the letter of the law. So are all these things like more like mitzvos that can't be defined, like more like a way of living?
No. In fact, the only one that is like that is Kedoshim Tihyo, which is what I'm going to start with. Yeah. So the second objective, we're not even through the objectives yet. That's fine. Look, my thought was like maybe we'll get through like 2 mitzvos, but I prepared a ton.
I don't think we know how to like.
I know that's kind of why I wanted us to do this also, because it is a skill to be able to cover ground. Because if you do everything in depth, I mean, it's great, but you also do miss out on a lot of knowledge. And that's why my second, that's gonna be relevant to my third objective. Second objective is to show the type of fluency I think we should all have in mitzvos. And what I mean by that is, it says in Devarim, Re'ei limarti eschem chukim u'mishpatim kasher tivani Hashem Elokai, lasos kein bekeref ha'aretz asher atem ba'im shama lirshta. So God taught us chukim and mishpatim. Okay. Ushmartem v'asisim, you should keep them and do them. I'm sure you've heard this before. Kihi chachmaschem ubinaschem le'eni ha'amim. They are your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the peoples, meaning the non-Jews. Asher yishmun es kol chukim ha'ele, that all of them will hear these chukim. Va'amrun, they'll say, Rak am chacham v'navan hagoy hagadol zeh. What a wise and discerning people is this great nation. That was the story about the Armenian in the airport security, that I told you about my friend who was taking it through airport security, and like the guy asked him what are those for? I didn't tell you this story?
I thought you were saying the Rolling Pin story.
Oh no, different. All right, fine. So I'll tell the story in 1 second. So this I think I did drill into your mind in Gemara, that not this source but the idea. Rambam says that every one of the 613 mitzvos serves to inculcate a true view or remove a false view, okay, to establish a righteous conduct in society or remove injustice, or to train us in a good character trait, or to caution us against an evil character trait. Everything is dependent on these 3 things. Hashkafos means our view of reality, midos, our character traits, and actions which shape society. So all the mitzvos have reasons that fall into these 3 categories. Thus, these 3 principles suffice for assigning a reason for each and every mitzvah. So the format we're going to try to follow today is we're going to name the mitzvah, say whether it's an essay and a los essay, and give a 1-phrase description, do a basic overview in bullet point form of what the halachos are, but not going into the details of practical halacha, just what does this mitzvah involve, and then give a couple ta'amei ha-mitzvos, either in midos, character traits, deos, ideas, or tzedakah and mishpat is justice and righteousness in society. And this is what I mean by fluency, is that ideally you should get to the point where someone can ask you about any mitzvah of the Torah. You can give like a few sentence description of what it involves, and then a basic reason for the mitzvah. And that's what the story was, that my friend Sammy Abitan was going to Seattle for Sukkot, and he was bringing his Arba Minim with him. And the security guard said, like, what is that? And he's like, we have this holiday where we pick up plants in order to recognize that God created nature. And the security guard goes, so you're saying the holiday is about appreciating nature? That's hot, man. That's hot. and that was like the security guard's reaction of, that was his way of saying, surely a great, wise and discerning people is this great nation, But like, that was what my friend did, is he said, he gave a 1-sentence description of the mitzvah and then gave like a reason for it. And the ideal is like, we should be able to do that with every mitzvah, that's the ideal. So, and that's the third, so that was what I meant, the fluency of, that we should have. And then the third thing is to motivate you to continue this project on your own, that if you're ever looking for something to do in your own learning, or when you go to seminary and you have a chavrusa or whatever, this is a great thing to do. And the Sefer HaChinuch really lends itself to that, because the Sefer HaChinuch goes through every mitzvah. He gives a summary of what it is without going in depth. And then he gives you a reason, at least one reason for the mitzvah, and it's just a nice project to embark on to do that. Okay. So that's the inspiration for this, this thing. Okay. Ready to start? Yeah. Boom. Okay. So, the first one is Kedoshim Tihyu. You should be wholly separate and different. Ki kadosh ni Hashem Elokeichem. Now, did you guys have a share on that this week?
Yeah.
You did. So you should probably be able to say, at least according to one opinion, what is this telling you to do?
Rashi says like the Jews are separate from Ariel.
Yeah.
Extra careful, and then Ramban says like going beyond the letter of the law. Like it could be like a Neville verse of Torah, but you really should like go beyond that.
Okay, good. That's perfect summary, right? So
that was good.
they're very good. So I did not actually include Rashi, but it is a mitzvah. It's a machlokas whether you count this as a mitzvah. So the Rambam does not count it as a mitzvah. So how do you think he understands the statement in the Torah that you should be holy?
And it's just like what the Torah is.
Exactly. Is it statement about all the other mitzvahs of the Torah? Like we say, Asher kiddushan of the mitzvos v'tzivanu, that all the mitzvahs make us kadosh. And what's our working definition of kadosh? Do you guys have a working definition?
Separate and above.
Yeah.
Separate and above in terms of what?
Not in terms of God, like he's on morality.
Above morality?
No, God's will.
Of God's will.
No, when I say above, I mean closer to.
Oh, closer towards, right? So what are you getting? What are you separating from, and what are you going above?
The animalistic.
Animalistic, yep.
And like other nations.
And other nations. Okay, good, right. So that's where the Ramban comes in. You gave a good summary, which is that all the mitzvos are to make us kadosh, but you could be a novel b'reshus Torah, which I translate as a jerk with the permission of the Torah. You know, I don't know how you novel's a weird word to translate. You know.
What are we learning with this fish line? Just had a word.
Isn't it?
Yeah, disgusting is an often way. I've heard people say villainous, but no one uses like villain except like a Disney villain. You know.
I like it though.
Yeah. So someone who keeps the strict halacha, but then like finds like ways around it to indulge in like the animalistic part.
Teflon.
Nah, that's just one man.
I think you just really like that word. Yeah. So therefore the Torah is telling us to go beyond the letter of the law. And that was what you were saying is like, are all the mitzvahs like that in this parsha? No, just this one. But it makes sense why this is the introductory one, because
I guess if it's teaching you like all this nitty gritty, you might think of it as like a checkbox.
exactly, right? In other words, this is really showing you how you should relate to all the other mitzvahs that don't stop here, go beyond the letter of the law and all these other ones, you know? And it's also highlighting what the purpose of all the mitzvahs is kedusha. Okay, now the reason, according to the Ramban, if he does count it as a separate mitzvah, is that, and this is my way of saying it, this is not his words, is that you have to realize that like the premise of the concept of Novel B'Reshus Torah is that the Torah doesn't automatically perfect you. It pushes you towards like good mitos and good ideas and good behaviors in society, but it's not synonymous with perfection. In order to do that, you have to learn the principles from the mitzvos and then apply them even when the mitzvos don't apply. Yeah, so that's like an important idea in its own right. You have a question? Yeah.
When you wrote Rambam, you can't have a mitzvah.
Oh yeah, that's one of the Rambam. Rambam has the Sefer Mitzvos, and he writes 14 rules about what counts as a mitzvah and what doesn't. And one of his, I want to say it's rule number 4 or 5, I think, is you can't have a mitzvah that's commanding you to keep all the other mitzvos. And my example for that is, I feel like I said this here before, is that if you have like a public pool and you have a rule, no pushing, no running, no jumping, no diving, follow all the pool rules. That would not be a particular rule that's telling you to keep all the other rules. That just doesn't make sense. Like, you know.
So that's why he's saying it's not.
That's why I say it's not a mitzvah. And truthfully, the Ramban doesn't fall into that trap because the Ramban is not saying that this is a mitzvah to keep all the other mitzvos. Yeah. He's saying it's going beyond that. So I don't think it's a machlokus in the sense of like they're disagreeing with each other's premises. I think it's just a question of what they count. Yeah. Okay. And again, I don't want to stifle questions. You can ask questions, but my mistake was I started to include like the actual sources. I was like, no, that's definitely not going to work. Okay. Ish imo va'aviv tira'u. Each man, his mother and father, this is a weird grammatical thing. His mother and father you shall revere, meaning revere your father and mother. The es shabsosai tishmoru, and you shall keep my Shabboses. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. So what mitzvah is this? What do we call this mitzvah? And this is a trick question.
I'm gonna say keep it away.
Yes, that's the trick answer, or that's the false answer. What mitzvah actually is this? Mora aveim, right? And I feel like yeah, very good. Revering your father and mother. I think revering is the best word because revering means to fear in how you behave. There's no mitzvah to feel fear of your parents. It's to behave in a reverential way, you know? Now, what does this mitzvah demand of you? And let's just, even though our parsha doesn't mention kibbud avim, I think when you're a little kid, you are taught that all of this goes under kibbud avim.
Yeah.
So what is under mora avim and what is under kibbud avim?
Kibbud
Okay, good. Like what?
Like helping them get dressed.
Yeah.
Like that, making their chair.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I think more is also like don't contradict them, don't
Okay, good.
like don't
Sit in
the
their
don't
All the don'ts. Okay, right. So don't sit in their place. Don't stand in their place. And standing in their place, I think, means like trying to take their role, like, without their permission, obviously. Don't contradict them. Don't outweigh them, meaning like if your parent is scolding your sibling and then you chime in on the parent's side and say like, yeah, don't forget to take out the garbage. It's like kind of like treading on their authority. Don't call them by their name or use their name for others in their presence. And again, all of these have detailed halachos. For example, you know what the basic parameters are about the name thing?
it's like a bae.
Yes, like yeah, we did learn this, right? Is that if it's an unusual name, then you can't ever use your parent's name even when they're not present. But if it's a common name, you just can't use it in their presence, but you could use it out of their presence.
Why would they use it?
What was it? Like, let's say, for example, like if you, let's say, oh, here's a good example, right? So your mom's name is Ayala. So if your mom and Ayala Fader are in the same room and you say to this one, hey, Ayala, that would be usher according to Morav Aim, for you to use your mom's name for someone else in her presence. But since Ayala is a fairly common name, then you could use the name Ayala outside of her presence. Okay, but if it were an unusual name, like I had a couple examples. Oh yeah. Charlize. So Charlize, I was gonna say that, but I was actually gonna use her mom's name because I was last time I taught this was within that class. So her mom's name is Svia, which is like the feminine form of Tzvi, not Sivia, but Svia, which I just never heard that name before, But Charlize is also like a very unusual name, So so then you would not be able to use that. So Charlize would not be able to use the name Svia at all outside of her mom's presence. Now, obviously, with all of these, your parents can give you permission, which is why I think most parents give their kids permission to use their, to use the name and stuff like that. But this is like the setup law.
What's the difference between
I think because it would impinge on, the whole idea is it would impinge on the reverence of your parents. So like if it's common and you use the name, it's not like any disrespect to your parents. But if you're casually using the name, like in other words, by reserving this name to only use for your parent, it's keeping the name special and that's giving reverence to them. A lot of these are modeled after the way we treat Hashem also, right? It's like there are names of Hashem that mean other things like Elohim, right? We use for angels, for Elohim, or for judges. But Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, we only apply to Hashem. You wouldn't use it outside.
Isn't like the Sephardi minhag to name after the living then kind of usher?
So Sephardim typically name after their grandparent. And there's no mitzvah, this mitzvah would not extend to your grandparent. You see what I'm saying? Oh, no. The kid, I see what you're saying, sorry. Yeah, meaning like if I name my kid like, Yosef and my father's name is Yosef. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So I guess they would grant permission then, I assume. Otherwise you get in weird, awkward family situations where you name all the kids after your parents, but you never use the name. Yeah. Kavod is, like you said, serving them food and drink, helping clothe and cover them, escorting them in and out, serving them in all the ways that a servant serves the master, meaning it's like an open-ended thing, standing up when they enter into the room, mentioning them in kavodi ways, like, like if you learned an idea from your dad, and you say, oh, I learned this from my dad, that's a kiyum, that's a fulfillment of kibbud av v'aim. And as you said, these are the do's, kavod is the do's, and mora is the don'ts. Okay, so that's those are those. Now, what are the reasons you've heard for kibbud av v'aim, or what would you think? Meaning in what sense?
If you don't revere your parents, it's hard to actually absorb anything.
Okay, that's true. That is definitely true. Who gives that reason? The Rambam gives that reason, I think. He says that it preserves the ideas and mitos, with each generation. And you see that that's not happening, let's say, like in America, right? Where people just like disrespect their parents and then the good values are not passed on because like they're allowed to like rebel, Yeah.
Like your parents are like God. And like not like diminish God, but
yeah.
Your parents are like God, like they made you. So it's like you have to have that attitude and then continue that attitude on to God.
Exactly. Okay, good. Anything else?
There's also something about the mother first because it's less natural.
Yeah, right. That's the thing is in Mora of Ve'im, it says Ish Imo Avitiro, because you tend to have less fear for your mother. And then Kibud av Ve'im is Kabed as Avicha Vesimecha, because you tend to have more kavod for your mother. So the Torah is basically saying that even you should make an extra effort to do this for the parent who it doesn't come naturally for, Yeah. So basic, what do you call it? Basic reason is Hakar Satov, is repaying your parents' kindness. They raised you and like toiled over you and stuff, and like treating them in a respectful and nice way is basic decency. And similarly, to not develop bad midos, if your parents feed you and clothe you and stuff like that, and you just like disrespect them, that is like insensitive. It's not grateful, and those are bad midos. Then recognizing that your parents are the cause of your existence, and from there recognizing that Hashem is the cause of all existence. These are the 4 reasons that the Sefer Chinuch gives. Okay. Yeah.
So for all these things, well, first of all, for the 3rd and 4th, or let's say parents are like give birth to a child and then they're like terrible parents, abusive.
Right. So there are you are not obligated to do kibud or mora for a parent who's a rasha. And that's one of those areas that the psak is not clear cut about, like objective criteria for what constitutes a rasha, because there are many ways to be evil, Yeah. So like, but there are cases I know of where there was an abusive parent and like the child is exempt from the mitzvah and like doesn't have to sit shiva and stuff like that also, Yeah.
Like what would be like not honoring your parents? Like, let's say someone like disconnected completely from their parents and just like doesn't talk to them. Like,
right.
Would that be violating it, or would it just be not doing it?
So it would not be doing kavod, right? Yeah. But then again, also like if they like, I don't know if you're obligated to put yourself in a circumstance where you do this mitzvah. Like, let's say, for example, your parent lives in Australia. Like, do you have to move to Australia so that you can then like do this mitzvah, or is it just when you're interacting with them, then you have to do kavod stuff, and like the more the better. That's true also, yeah. That is true, that is true. I was gonna say one more detailed point, and then we gotta move on. Halakhically, this applies to your birth parents. If you're adopted, then you definitely should do these things. But if, let's say you're adopted, but then you find your birth parents, all of this would apply to them also, meaning that that's like the primary category. Okay, now, when I made this for my 10th grade class, I did not cover mitzvos that are mentioned in earlier parshios. So Shabbos is mentioned in the Sefer Dibros, but really quickly, the question here, what question would you ask on this pasuk?
Saying it again.
Okay, why is it saying it again?
Why is it after the mom?
Yeah, what does it have to do with the parents, right? And that's a question.
You violate Shabbos.
That's exactly right. So that's Chazal's answer. Oh yeah.
I went through like 10 times.
Okay, yeah. So Sefer Chinuch, he gave the philosophical explanation is that both Shabbos is about recognizing God as the creator, and Kibud av Ve'im and Mora av Ve'im are about recognizing God as the creator. So there's philosophically tied. Rambam is what you said, which is that that if your parents tell you to violate halacha, then the reason why you don't do it is because you are obligated to honor them, but you and they are obligated to honor God. So no one can override God. The Abravanel it says an interesting thing that it's emphasizing the I guess the chukim dimension of this mitzvah. Like, it is one of the mishpatim, but you shouldn't do it just because like you love your parents, even though that's nice. You shouldn't do it because of the just because it's the normal thing in society. You should do it because God commanded it. Meaning that, let's say, like, for example, if a person only did it for because they love their mother or whatever. Something that, what was it? No, Kibud av Ve'im.
And Shabbos.
Oh, and Shabbos, yeah. Oh, you asked, I see what you're asking.
Like, let's say I keep Shabbos just for my family.
No, in other words, if I remember correctly, the Abravanel is saying that just as you only keep Shabbos because God commanded it, you should keep Kibud av Ve'im because God commanded it.
You think there's absolutely no?
No, not saying that there's absolutely, but saying that in other words,
should be the attitude. Like,
that should be the attitude, yeah. And what I'm adding to this, I don't know if this is what he meant, is that if you just did it because of societal reasons, you're not going to relate to the mitzvah in a way that is a tool to perfect you or to like get these benefits from. Like you're not going to think of these philosophical ideas or like use it as a means of developing good mitzvos. You're just doing it because like we respect our parents, you know. So that's what I mean by like the chukim dimension of the mishpatim. That mishpatim are mitzvos we would have done anyway, but just because we wouldn't have done it anyway doesn't mean that like the Torah is having us do it for those same reasons. The Torah is trying to elevate us and instill with us greater perfections, you know. Rabbeinu Bachya is he says whenever it says I am Hashem at the end of a pasuk, it's emphasizing that God will reward you, and whenever it says Elokechem, it's emphasizing that God will punish you for violating it. And I guess because these are two stringent mitzvos, then it says it, but he doesn't explain the connection.
Which one does it say?
It says, you mean in our pasuk?
Yeah.
It says Ani Hashem Elokechem. It says both. It says both. Yeah. Meaning, and we know that honoring and revering your parents has a great reward, but it's also very strict because it's compared to honoring God, and Shabbos is also obviously both. Yeah. Okay, next pasuk. Al tifnu el ha'elilim. Do not turn towards the false gods. Elilim comes from the lashon of al with an aleph, which means not. So like literally means like the not gods. Don't turn towards the not gods. Ve'elohim ma'asecha lo sasulchem. Don't make molten gods out of metal. Ani Hashem Elokechem. So do you know what so this is called al tifnu el ha'elilim. Do not turn towards the other gods. Do you know what that mitzvah commands you to do or not do? Yes, that's one. Learning about Avodah Zarah, right? And what do you say, Ayala? Okay,
so is like another god on top of God? Is it talking about that category?
It's talking about any god other than Hashem. Yeah. So this includes several things. Okay, and this is according to, we're starting off with the Rambam. Don't read Avodah Zarah books. We'll qualify this in a second. Don't read Avodah Zarah books. Don't fantasize about Avodah Zarah. Don't admire Avodah Zarah idols or objects associated with Avodah Zarah. Do not investigate how the Ovdi Avodah Zarah worship or what their beliefs are out of interest or curiosity. However, footnote. Yeah, okay, footnote. You are allowed to investigate Avodah Zarah beliefs in order to understand how false or destructive or harmful they are, but only if you are adequately trained in critical thinking and logic and not prone to be influenced by them. That's what we said earlier of lo sasiru achar levavachem achar einechem. So let's say, for example, like you're someone just told me about this. Oh yeah, one of the guys in yeshiva is in college in a class about studying Christianity, and he asked Shaila, and the psak he received was that was basically for this reason, as long as he's like doing it in order to like understand like the psychological appeal of Christianity or like what their mistakes are or like where they got stuff wrong in the Torah, you know. Ramban says that this is saying to not believe that there's any power or reality in Avodah Zarah beliefs or practices.
Yeah,
Meaning,
I remember we did that about a tree. It's like you might think that it's just an abomination to God because like it's not towards God, but really the practice itself is like an abomination.
Yeah. Also, this is emphasizing that that like, you know, don't think, let's say a lot of these Avodah Zarah claim to have like special powers and stuff. Don't think that God just said it's usher, but it's really real. But like, don't attach a reality to like what they're doing, you know?
I mean, let's say it was like the horoscope and that.
Yeah, so that's machlokas we're showing about whether that's real or not. Yeah.
Okay. You know, let's say any Avodah Zarah, like,
yeah.
Could you say that there is like a psychological reality to it?
Yes, there could definitely be a psychological reality. Yeah. Okay. I should clarify this. Meaning, it's a machlokas rishonim whether magic is real or not, right? The Rambam holds it's not, the Ramban holds it is, and then everyone sides on both, you know, one side or the other. But when it comes to worshiping other gods, this is saying that it's not enough to just refrain from doing the action of worshiping them, but if you believe that this worship has power, that somehow like this God is going to do something like that, that's
reality.
Yeah, that's attaching reality to it. Was someone going to say something?
Yeah, I had a question. Is this where the prohibition of looking at like Christian art comes from?
Yes, exactly. And this is obviously subject to lots of details. No, right. So I mean, again, there's a lot of questions here. Like, does Christianity qualify as Avodah Zarah halachically? You know, are there cases where you're allowed to study it for different reasons? So, you know, these are lots of halachic things. The reason for this, I think, is kind of self-evident. What would the reason be for all these things?
Be attracted to Avodah Zarah and you'll wanna. Like you'll get involved.
Yeah, exactly, right. So it's a very powerful attraction. And this is my own analogy, is just like you shouldn't experiment with drugs for the sake, I shouldn't say, that's a not clear sentence. You shouldn't experiment with drugs. Why not? For the sake of your physical well-being. Okay. So too, you shouldn't experiment with avodah zarah for the sake of your intellectual or spiritual well-being. I'm using the drugs analogy because it's not like any particular instance of a drug is going to like condemn you to death, right? But it's a dangerous thing to experiment with because of the high stakes. So like, I'm phrasing this mushal this way because if someone says, oh, really? Like if I admire a church that I'm going to become a Christian? No one's saying that. But categorically speaking, there are attractive elements in avodah zarah, and truthfully, this was much more powerful in the olden days when these were the standard forms of worship. I think because we live in a society that is scientific minded, then it's not, the pull is not as strong, but it's also more subtle. Like there are very subtle ways of being drawn into this that
Also, I think societally, like we admire other cultures. We have like a certain way of like seeing other things, like admiring it for its own sake. Not
that's also true, right? Yeah. Like every culture has like value and like yeah, that's true.
It's more cultural and not as
Exactly. It's not as religious. That's a good way to put it.
Practices like as a beautiful thing, but not
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you saying that's bad or?
It's different. I think there's
different.
it is positives and negatives, like it's the positive is that it's not in religious terms. The negative is that you could still, because it's not in religious terms, you can end up being like seduced into being attracted to things and think that you're not really like changing your religious ideals, I don't know. Not sure.
Give me an example.
Well, let's say for,
Thanksgiving.
I'll give you a great example, okay, where the lines are really not clear. Buddhism, right?
I was literally thinking that.
So Buddhism is, the reason why Buddhism is unclear is because it's not a Western religion. And when we think of religions, we think in Western categories. So there are aspects of Buddhism which are religious, and then there are aspects that are just, ethical. There are aspects that are psychological. There are aspects that are just chachma, So, but Buddhism has a certain appeal, both for like good reasons, like there are good practices in Buddhism, but also there's a certain like mystique, like, ooh, and yeah, that's also true, right?
Like statues are problematic.
Yeah, but let's say I was just listening to to a podcast, and the guy was talking about mindfulness and meditation, and I was like, thumbs up, and then he was saying how like he'll light incense and like do a bunch of like Buddhist practices and stuff, and I'm like, well, hard to tell like what of that is just getting your psyche into like the mood, and what of that is like engaging in actual avodah zarah and like like believing in certain things about the soul. So like the lines are very hard to tell. So I think Buddhism is an area where this danger still applies because it's not in our Western categories, so.
Or even just like looking at things that they've created, like thinking they're pretty.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay. By the way, the molten thing, that was covered in Shemos, so that's why I didn't include it here. But that's the Isser to make idols. Okay. And that's also obvious why God doesn't want us making idols is both for this reason and also the practical reason of like posing a harm, threat. Okay. Now this one is 4 mitzvos, but they're all related. So when you harvest the harvest of your land, do not finish off the corner of your fields to harvest, and the gleanings of your harvest do not gather. In your vineyard you shall not pluck completely, and the fallen fruit of your vineyard you shall not gather. For the poor, and the convert you shall leave them. I am Hashem your God. So anyone know what these mitzvos are called? You can kind of see them in the Hebrew there. Leket, Shechacha, Peah. Yeah, okay, good, right? So Peah is leave the corners of your field for the poor. And there's a Lo Sa'aseh also, which is to don't not leave the corners of your field for the poor. And whenever you see a mitzvah that has an aseh and a corresponding Lo Sa'aseh, what's the basic reason? Double strict. Yeah, it is to make sure that you do it, right? Like don't do malachos on Shabbos and rest on Shabbos, Basic overview is leave the corners of the poor leave the corners of your field for the poor to eat. Mida Oraisa, there's no shear. You can leave as big corners as you want, but Mida Rabbanan, you have to leave at least 1/60th of your corners. Mida Oraisa, this is only done in Eretz Yisrael. Mida Rabbanan, even in Chutz La'aretz. Okay, we'll go for the reasons later. You know what leket is?
Yeah,
If it falls when you're harvesting stuff and stuff falls, you leave it for the poor. If 1 or 2 stalks. What was it?
I was gonna say if you drop the whole thing, then.
Yeah, then you could go ahead and pick it up. That'd be pretty, especially for clumsy people. That'd be pretty bad. Yeah, you leave them for the poor.
Like put a chain on this side.
Yeah, exactly. If 3 or more fall, then they belong to you. And if they fall because of some compulsion, like you get stuck by a thorn and then you drop all of them, or you drop one of them, then you can still keep that one. Peas hakerem, this is exactly the same as Pea of the field, but for the vineyard. Okay, and then Peret hakerem is like the equivalent of leket for the for vineyards. Okay, what's the basic reason for this, or reasons? To help society, right? So the first one is providing for the poor, and it's a way. It doesn't seem like this now for us, but it's a way that it like allows them to collect with dignity, where you're not like handing out to them like, here you go. You know, it's kind of like they have those like I've heard around New York there are places that are like, you know, set up like a grocery store, but it's all for tzedakah, and like the poor people can go in and like take their own stuff, and so it doesn't feel like they're getting handouts, you know. Also, the reason given is that God ties this to one of the reasons for hashgacha pratis, that if you want me to bless your agricultural success, you have to realize that your food is being grown for all people, you know, and devote it to that, and then God will bless your produce even more, and that's also good for society. Obviously, it's good mitos is to combat stinginess and promote generosity, and then deos is reminding you that, again, deos is ideas in Ralbagian terms. It's confusing. In Rambam terms, hilos deos means character traits. In Ralbag's terms, it means ideas, you know. So it's reminding you that God is the real owner of the land, and he's only like letting you like use it. So God gets to dictate what you do with your land, you know. Okay, lo tignovu, do not steal. So what's the difference between geneva and gazela? Okay, so that's a separate thing, which is in the Aseret Dibros when it says lo tignov, that's stealing a person, and that's geneva. I'm saying now, with regards to property, what's the difference between geneva and gazela?
One of them, like, you take like a little bit every time, and one of them, like, you take the whole thing at once. Or it's like everyone contributes to it.
No, I don't think so, unless there's something I don't know about.
Stealing like a halachic way, like if you steal, I don't know. We learned from this gravity about stealing. How like if it's in your ownership, it's assumed that you're the one. I don't know, unless you can prove that it.
Oh, okay. So that sounds like it falls under Geneva. Okay. So the difference is a ganav steals secretly without the owner's knowledge. A gazlan steals openly through force. So the English term for stealing openly through force?
Robbing.
Yeah, robbery or mugging, right? Like robbery, or, you know, is they know that you're stealing from them. So that's the basic distinction. Geneva is theft and gazela is robbery. Basic overview is if you steal anything worth a pruta or more, then you've committed geneva. Okay, pruta is like a coin worth. I always forget how much a pruta is worth now. Like
something less, it's less than a penny.
I think it's less than a nickel, but I'm not really sure. I always forget what the worth of a pruta is. The typical penalty for geneva is paying back double the amount, but there are exceptions. So this is an important thing. Mita oraisa, it's also usher to steal less than a pruta's worth, or to steal in other ways. Like if you steal with the intent to return it, or if you steal with the intent to pay. Let's say like you go into a store and like you just take something and then like you say, oh, I'll pay for it later, you know? Or you steal as a joke. This is when I feel like I've seen like people in school do a lot. Like they'll take someone's notebook just to play a prank on them, and like it'll freak the person out. You know, that's actually asur midoraisa. Or to stealing to anger the owner. So all of these. So the primary form is pruta or more, but all of these are asur midoraisa because they can habituate you to do full forms of geneva. So it's almost like offense against full geneva. What's the reason? Obvious reasons. Mitos. And society, yeah, right. The primary one is really society would fall apart if people were allowed to steal, right? And then mitos also is there's lots of bad mitos that it promotes in terms of like, you know, entitlement and like not respecting other people and all this other stuff. And then deos also is has to do, I think we mentioned this in a previous year, is this notion that like I can own your stuff, but you can't own my stuff. Like I have the right to take from you, but you don't have the right to take from me. That's like illogical, you know, that's like a double standard. So Genevas das is more of a form of lying than stealing because it has to do with tricking someone. And Genevas das, I think, is going to actually fall under a different mitzvah in Parashas Kedoshim. Okay, which we'll see if we get there. Okay, lo techachashu v'lo teshakru. Okay, now it sounds like it's saying, okay, do not deny falsely. That's one. Sounds like saying don't lie, right? Now this is why we need to talk about pet, because lo techachashu, which I assume you guys don't know what that is.
We did it with Sarah because when she laughed.
Oh, but that's not the same thing as the Isser in Taryag mitzvos. But you're right, is that she did deny.
Right.
But this is something else,
It's
though.
a different kind of
Different, yeah. So this is falsely denying possession of an object that is not yours. So for example, it is usher to deny the possession of something that someone gave you for safekeeping. So let's say I give my phone to Ayala, and then I ask for it back and she says, I don't have your phone. That would be lo techachashu.
you or for someone else.
For
If you ask me,
good question. I think definitely for me.
Yeah.
I don't think for other people. I don't think.
Someone lets you borrow their car and you're like, yeah, it's my car. That's what I thought you were saying.
Oh, no. This is like, I'm pretty sure it's when the owner comes to ask for it. Another case would be if you steal it, right? If I steal your pen and then you ask me about it and I say, I don't have it.
You ate it.
Or another one, this is unfortunately a common one, is you do a paid job, right? Like you should get paid. And then you ask them if they, to pay, and they say, we don't have the money. If they actually do have the money, then then they're in violation of this. And obviously this goes against justice to lie and say you don't have someone's object if you actually have it. It's bad mitos because it's a form of lying. It's manipulative, yeah.
Deny their own reality.
Exactly, yeah, right. It gets rid of your integrity, right, internally, and your care for other people. Now, lo teshakru is the exact same thing, but if you swear about it. So all the same cases, but if you take an oath, you swear that you don't have it, that's a different isser. So if you deny it, you get one lo saseh. If you deny it and swear, then you get a second lo saseh. Yeah. Okay. Do not swear by my name for falsehood, and desecrate the name of your God, I am Hashem. So we call this in Hebrew. Yeah, what kind of shvuah? Shvuah sheker, false oath, right? That is an oath in vain, which is a different category. So 4 categories of shvuah sheker, 2 for the past and 2 for the future. If you say I ate I ate a sandwich, or I threw a stone, and you swear, sorry, you're saying this as a lie, right? We swear to a lie that you say you did something when you really didn't, or you say that you didn't do something when you really did, or saying that you will do something which you don't do, or saying that you won't do something which you really do. Okay, so all those, if you swear falsely, then it is shvuah sheker. But a shvuah can only be made on something that's voluntary, not a mitzvah. So for example, if I swear that I put on tefillin this morning and I didn't, I don't violate this law because it's considered that tefillin is already covered by the oath that I took at Har Sinai. Okay, so this is only for like voluntary stuff. The penalty for doing shvuah sheker is whiplashes. This is obviously, so how is this instrumental for society? This is an interesting one.
You need like an environment where people are keeping their word.
Exactly, right? And even the American courts, like you swear in a court of law, and it's funny because like the institution of a shavua is like, it's another layer of honesty that like, it's like everyone in society agrees we're not going to cross this line. And if we did, we'd be in a lot of trouble because then people could just like lie, whenever they wanted to.
Is this just like, if you make the statement, I swear I will not, blah, 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 that's what the isser is, or you have to say, I swear in God's name?
Okay, so this is where it gets extremely complicated because how you express it is a huge part of the halachos of Shavua. And then there's also neder, which is a vow, which is a different thing. And even I don't remember what the halachos are. And it's also very complicated about like subtle differences in language. The reason why swearing the name of Hashem is such a big deal is to reinforce the idea that there's nothing like Hashem. And if you're taking Hashem's name in vain, you're treating it like a mundane thing. This also reinforces our fear of Hashem by not using his name for like, bad purposes. And if you swear in God's name that something is true and it's not, when you swear in God's name, you're basically saying that just like God exists and is real, so too my word is true. So if you're doing that for falsehood, then you're kind of implying that God doesn't exist. So it's like a blasphemous statement almost. Okay. We have 30 seconds. Yeah. All right, fine. You know what? This is a good stopping point, but hopefully you get an idea of what I mean about how like, if you could do this with every mitzvah, just not knowing all the halachos, just like having like a few sentence summary of each thing, and then giving a basic reason, then you would, first of all, you would know Torah a lot more, and you'd be able to like orient yourself within the system, and you'd appreciate like how the Torah perfects you as a system. And so it's a good thing. Again, Sefer Chinuch really lends itself to this. He'll give like a paragraph summarizing stuff like this, and then he'll give at least one reason. And so it's a good thing to have a chavrusa in if you want that. Okay. You're welcome. Maybe we should go over this in Jewish ethics, like just keep going, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff to cover, you know.
I like it.
All righty. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.